Welcome to another episode of my podcast, That's Fine With Me. And, well, you can tell we're going to be talking about something weird because I have this weird makeup on. At first, I wanted to talk about fashion, conglomerate, some fast fashion and luxury products, how it's happening, the capital of fashion itself. And then I realized I'm going to be having something like this on my face for the rest of the podcast. And if you're listening, that's one thing because you have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you're watching this podcast, well, sorry, guys. Yeah, I have a weird clown on my face, but it's just for demonstrative purposes for my tutorials. We're going to jump right into this podcast. We are talking about sociopath and psychopath. So I guess there is a difference between these two categories. There was not even categories, but classifications of a disease. But for a reason, this is a disorder, and a lot of maniacs are fallen into these categories. And I was doing my research, and I wanted to start with maybe some childhood trauma. And I believe a lot of maniacs, they suffered through certain childhood trauma, but no, it's not true. Honestly, it was a little bit weird when I was learning about some, let's say, famous sort of maniacs, and I realized, such as Ted Bundy, he had pretty much good childhood, despite the fact that his sister was his mom, basically. His childhood wasn't extremely bad. I did some digging, and I realized his grandparents, they found out their daughter was pregnant and she was a teenager or a minor. I don't remember who she was at the time, but I know they were ashamed of it. So they made sure that this kid would be their sort of kid and his mother is going to be his sister. And later on, when he found out about this whole scheme, let's say, he started killing, and that's how he explained his desire to kill. Though it's weird because I know it's shocking information to know that your sister's probably your mom, but it's not to the factor and not to the point where when you start killing, you might, break any contact with your family members, but start killing, it's a little bit different. I guess this disease was forming when he was born. It's not something that he got just because of some shocking news and shocking information. As well as Jeffrey Dahmer, relatively, he had pretty much normal childhood, except for the fact that he actually liked killing animals. Not even killing, but he picked up some dead animals with his dad, and he stuffed those animals. That is creepy, but I know a lot of people all over the world, they're doing the same thing and they're not killers. So it's really hard to say that this was the main sign that he's going to be a killer one day. But probably should have rang some bells. Then we're going to be talking, he was super lonely, and that was probably the main reason why he started killing. And we're going to dive into this a little bit later because I'm going to be still describing some categories of this psychopath behavior. But for now, and sort of divide them into different sections, let's say. But for now, let's start with the definition. So the whole definition of a psychopath wasn't a term up to 1888 because the German psychiatrist, he was doing some research and he was kind of, doing, I guess not even doing a research, but he had some patients and he couldn't describe their symptoms at some point because, up until 1888, there were no word for psychopath. And he created a word, I guess he sort of described this as a sanity without delirium. And in other words, it's rational madness. Rational madness, it's like when the person is knowing what he's doing and he's not in a state where he has no idea where is he, who is he. He knows who is he knows what he's doing or she's doing, but mainly this is a disease of a man. It's quite rare for women to have this disease. And he's mad while he's doing all this stuff, but he's conscious and he knows what he's or she's doing. That is the main reason why it's called rational madness. And of course, it started with a psychiatrist, J.L.A. Koch, or Koch. I don't know. Guys, let me know in the comments what is the right pronunciation for a German name. It's Koch. So, Koch. I don't know. Maybe something like that. I have no idea how to pronounce German names. And he used the word psychopathic or something like that. And the meaning of this, it's lacking of moral core. This described pretty well the person because this person most of the time were a little bit aggressive. They had no empathy, no remorse, and most of the time those people were accurately planning their deeds. And most of the time those people are quite successful and they are super intelligent, but they're lacking the moral core. It's the same probably thing as lacking a soul, maybe in throughout centuries, a lot of books contained this sort of definition of a psychopath, but at the same time, they didn't know how to call it. So they demonized those people. In the Dorian Gray, probably the same example, when the person sort of sold his soul and he was doing all these deeds and he witnessed this because he was lacking the soul. But on the other hand, it's probably the reason for him to be a psychopath, and that is the main idea why he started killing and all of it. But okay, so in 1980s, a Canadian, I guess, psychologist, so the Robert Hare, he wanted to categorize the disease, and not even categorize, but he wanted to create a table or a checklist for psychologists, other psychologists and psychiatrists, to define those people, not even define, to define, I guess, those people, and to know who's a psychopath, who's sociopath, who is with a little bit different type of disease. So he created a 20-item inventory checklist where he included a lot of different, let's say, points how to understand who is a psychopath. And of course, there were a lot of different mentions, but they were studying the person from two different perspectives. The first one, when they were talking to the person and when they were asking and sort of not even interrogating, but talking to the person and realizing what he's capable of. And the second one was, they were probably, most of the time when they were studying those people, they were sort of like doing something bad, and that is the main reason why they were studying their history, their background, and then they were doing some conclusions. By the way, it's really important to know that on the scale from 0 to 40, if I'm not mistaken, they could understand, is it a psychopath? So if it was a 0 to 30, that is not a psychopath. It's just some dude who's literally maybe a sociopath who just doesn't really care what he's or she's doing. And from 30 to 40, this is a real psychopath, and it's a really, really scary type of person. And we're going to talk about this, but we're going to dive into this a little bit later, and we're going to have certain examples to see what is the difference between those types. And of course, about sociopath, it's not even a real study. Basically, a couple of scientists, psychologists in 20s and 30s or 40s, they conducted certain studies. Those were, let me read them, Lee, Nalkin Robbins, Sheldon, and Eleanor Gluck. I guess she's a Gluck, or I believe she's a Gluck. And so Robinson, she was studying kids at the early age, and then she was following them through their life, probably. So this study took a lot of years, and of course, she started in 1920, and then she stopped her study in 1950s. And throughout all this experience, she was interviewing them when they were 25, 35, and 45. Most of those kids, they ended up in prison because they were super aggressive from the early age. The best, I guess, news that the sociopath is not, if he has a kid, his kid or her kid is not going to inherit this syndrome, or I guess this is a disease or some sort of like disorder. And that is good, because this is not a disease that we call schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a disease, if I'm not mistaken, of a clown that was doing horrible things. Schizophrenia is a specific disease that can be inherited, and it's definitely going to be inherited, because my grandma, she has a friend, her mom, she had a schizophrenia, and then she inherited this from her mom. And yeah, that's really, really scary disease. But most of the time, they're not harmful. Most of the time, not all of them. The one that the clown, he was pretty much harmful. And of course, so they decided that this disease is chronic. You cannot heal it. You cannot do anything about this. Most of the time, those people are aggressive and they're really impulsive. They cannot control. They will not probably plan. Everything happens within seconds. So if they feel a threat, or if they want to threat someone, they're just going to act. They're not going to think of it. And this is a main, let's say, diversity between those types. But I do believe that sociopath is something that people are still ignoring, that a lot of killers and a lot of maniacs, they still might possess sociopath, let's say, behavior. And for psychopath, it's really common to not even conduct, but kill people in the privacy of their own apartment or home, or in a basement, somewhere that they feel more or less safe. They're not going to do this somewhere else because they love comfort zones. And of course, then they're going to probably get rid of the body, dismember the body, and they will bring another victim into their home. The weirdest part that those psychopaths, sometimes they might have families and they might be very, very good fathers. They might be teachers. One of those maniacs lived in Soviet Union, I guess in 80s or 90s. And if I'm mistaken, he had death penalty as well. And his name was Chikatilo. He was born, I guess, right now it's Ukraine, but later on it was just the Soviet Union. And he was a teacher at some period of time. And while he was not even studying kids, teaching them, he had some situation where he tried to calm down a girl who was screaming or something like that, and he felt sexual arousal while he was doing this, and that's why he kind of shifted. He was fired, if I'm not mistaken, from school, and then he shifted and he started acting like a real maniac. But it's a whole different story. I don't even know in what category he falls. I guess he's a psychopath mainly, basically. But he wasn't doing this at home, and if I'm mistaken, he had kids. And he had a horrible childhood, by the way, and some other maniacs, they had horrible childhood. But still, it doesn't explain the fact that they're doing horrible things right now, or they used to do horrible things, especially in the 20th century, because we were lacking a lot of, let's say, camera and witnesses and fingerprints. That was the main reason why I guess those were not scared to act. But still, I guess a lot of maniacs are still like walking around us. Among us, basically. And of course, most of the time, those maniacs, they will have, most of the time, but not maniacs. Again, we're going to talk about different categories, maybe in my future podcast. But for now, if he's a psychopath, most of the time, he's not emotionally attached. That is the main reason why he's going to have a promiscuous lifestyle, sexual behavior, basically, and short-term relationship if he has any sort of relationship in his life. And let's talk a little bit about the difference between those psychopaths and sociopaths. It's quite interesting that for both, it's actually antisocial personality disorder, and sociopath, they're lacking remorse, but at the same time, they have guilt and they have empathy. And one of those was a woman, Diane Dons, if I'm not mistaken, and she killed her own kids. And then she kind of like, people just, they consider her being a sociopath because she had some guilt and she was quite empathetic to her kids, but at the same time, she was no remorseful to her own kids. And then she blamed someone else but her, and she's sent to prison, but has no death penalty. Then they actually can feel some emotions. Sociopaths most of the time will feel rage, and they will act on this rage, and they're really impulsive. And they might actually feel pretty much attached to certain family members, or maybe they have some relationship and they maybe have some family and kids at the same time. So basically, they do have empathy and they feel emotionally attached to someone. Those are not always narcissists. Those can be just pretty much aggressive and impulsive. And they are super irresponsible for the acts they performed, mainly if, for example, this Diane killed her kids. She tried to blame someone else, but not herself. She was super irresponsible for the act she performed. And of course, they're constantly lying and they are pretty much deceptive. So, and I told you that they're still pretty much aggressive, and it's really, really hard for them to keep them kind of sane. And they're really, really reckless and have no plan. Most of the time, they will act with no plan at all. And it actually reminds me of Jeffrey Dahmer, because a lot of psychologists, they're saying he wasn't a sociopath, but he's actually fallen into this category as well, because he felt pretty much attached to his victims. Most of the time, those were his partners, and he actually killed a lot of guys under, I guess, 18. Not a lot, but some people were under 18. And then when they try to leave him, and he had this weird kind of like problem because his dad left him one day and his mom left him, and he felt super lonely, and his parents, they were always fighting. And that was probably the main triggering thing for him, because when someone tried to leave him, he wanted them to stay. And impulsively, pretty much aggressively, he killed his victims, and then he just chambered them and try to hid them in his own apartment. The weirdest part that when I watched the Netflix series, and I don't really know if it's super true or not, because I read about Jeffrey Dahmer later on, his biography, but I know it wasn't anything to stand out, because Ted Bundy, I remember a little bit about his biography and what he was doing. And if we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, I don't really remember much except for the series. And he was not even super cruel, but, well, he was dismembering, I guess. When he was dismembering people and his lovers, mainly he wanted to feel closeness, and that's why he was eating some parts of their body, which is super disgusting. And he was actually keeping some of the heads, or yeah, if I'm mistaken, he was keeping heads, and created some sort of circle, and he was talking to them. So it's basically given the feeling of not even empathy. He wasn't remorseful at all, and he was impulsive, but at the same time he didn't really want to let go, and he was sentimental at some point when he was, I don't know, maybe stuffing those people or stuffing animals. I don't know, guys. Sorry, I'm super incorrect. You are free to know me in the comments, because I am not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist, professional psychologist at all. And if we're trying to compare a psychopath, it's a little bit different category of people. Those are narcissists. Most of the time, they're going to be narcissists. And those are super rare. So psychopaths are only 0.5% or maybe 1% of population. That's why probably there's not so much maniacs still. They're just like, it's a big deal, but thank God we don't really have these cases every single month or every single year. It's quite rare. That's why it's only 1% of population. And most of the time, it's going to be men. For women, it's still quite common disease as well, but for men the percentage is a little bit higher. So they have absolutely no emotions. They're emotionless, and they're pretending to have any sort of emotions, but most of the time they don't have them. And they are super intelligent. As I mentioned this earlier, they tend to be super successful. And I don't know, when I was reading some articles, I realized that they thought Frank Abagnale, remember Catch Me If You Can or something with Leonardo DiCaprio. So they actually said that he was a psychopath, but he wasn't killing people, but he was really smart, successful, and pretty much emotionless. I don't really know. I don't really think he's a psychopath. Honestly, I don't really think so. That's why it's really hard to say who is a psychopath and who's not, because it takes time, patience, and actually a lot of specialists to define one. But most of the time, they're extremely manipulative, and their behavior is weird, because most of the time they're going to be super harmful. And it's really interesting because most of this, like for example Ted Bundy, he was a sex symbol, I guess, in 80s, or maybe, I don't know, yeah, I guess maybe in 80s. Or 70s, I don't remember. And a lot of women, they wanted to date him, even when he was at court and he was defending himself. Look at this. It's a little bit different kind of situation. He's super intelligent. He was planning ahead. And by the way, he lived with a woman and her daughter, and he didn't kill them. So partially, he was still killing some women, but he lived with someone else. But emotionally, I guess he wasn't attached to this woman, and he's super dishonest, which is okay. I mean, like, it's pretty much okay that they're lying. They're manipulators and liars. They're quite impulsive, but deep down, I guess they're not going to be as impulsive as sociopath, because they know when to act and they know how to plan. And about Ted Bundy, he was really well educated, and if I'm not mistaken, he had some degree in psychology, which is getting even scarier when you know that someone knows psychology and he knows how to manipulate women, as well as he was studying some law. And I guess that was the main reason why he was defending himself at court. But the worst evidence they found against Ted Bundy, and he had really his teeth, they were not even, and one of the victims had a bite on her leg, I guess, or maybe her thigh, and while he kind of like bit her, she had a mark of his teeth. And of course, some doctors, basically dentists, they said that every single person has its own I don't know, like teeth shape, or like I guess some shape of teeth, and it's pretty much 100% truth. If someone bit this victim, then this is going to be Ted Bundy. And he tried to say that it's not true or something like that, but to brush it off. But yeah, he was found guilty in killing. Then a lot of the times he escaped prison, but he was enjoying the gloriness of the situation. Then he was at a spotlight. A lot of women loved him. And I know that right now the list of victims is under, I guess, 30 women, but those are victims that they found, the bodies that they found. A lot of people are assuming that Ted Bundy killed over 100-something people. And of course, while he was at a death penalty, let's say, not even a death penalty, but he was in prison and he faced death penalty, he tried to prolong his life. And all this time, he was given some more hints where he buried some new bodies. But later on, everyone were tired of his manipulations. Again, those were manipulations. And they actually sends him to death. And he died, I guess, in 90s, probably in 80s or 90s, something like that. I don't remember. So yeah, basically they have no shame. They are not able to form any emotional connection to anyone, and they're narcissists. That is the main reason why I feel like it's really hard to put Jeffrey Dahmer in the same position, because Jeffrey didn't actually want to have a spotlight, and a lot of people are speculating he tried in prison some guy. He didn't really try him. He acted so he would beat him and then he would kill him. So he wanted to end up his own suffers. He felt super lonely. That's why I guess he formed some sort of emotions. Especially he was really close to his dad. And it's not a quality of a psychopath. Most of the time, it's a quality of a sociopath. And it's really difficult to tell who he was, because another psychiatrist or psychologist, when he check out the series about Jeffrey Dahmer, he said he's probably bipolar. He has a bipolar disorder, but I'm not really sure that's bipolar, because most of the time bipolar people, they have severe conditions of depression, and then they have extremely great, in beautiful days when they feel happy. They feel happiness. That's why it's really weird. I don't really think he felt any sort of happiness, but it's my personal opinion, guys. So what do you think? Do you believe in this theory? Because I guess it's really hard to put them in this category. Most of the time, do we really need to know who is this person? Is he a Is he a psychopath? Is he a sociopath? If he killed someone, and if he did this to numerous people, I guess death penalty or prison at least. And I know that a lot of those criminals, they try to act like they have some sort of disorder and disease, as like Once Flying Upon Cuckoo's Nest or something like this. Do you remember? He was pretty much healthy, but he acted like he was mentally not okay. And I guess a lot of them try to be this, because especially if we're talking about this clown maniac, so he was mainly focusing on boys, little boys. And of course, when he goes to prison, a lot of those prisoners, they're probably going to act on him in a way, like, I guess, guys, you know in what way they're going to act. And of course, most of those maniacs, they're quite scared of this. And that's why they try to act like they're not okay, mentally not okay, and just live their life in the hospital. And it's so much easier to run from a hospital if they are genius and they're super, super kind of like intelligent. That was another reason why they wanted to go to a hospital and to be sort of treated. And yeah, it's not super easy. It's not super easy, because still psychologists are not stupid people as well. They have their own patterns and they know how to do this. And even Ted Bundy, having the education of a psychologist, he couldn't fool people, because, well, still he's a psycho. He's not okay. And that's pretty much it, guys, for today's podcast. It's spooky season. That's why I'm focusing mainly on some spooky topics. And especially, it's probably going to end when the October ends. But for now, we're talking about some serious, spooky, crazy topics. If you have any suggestions, if you have any ideas what we should discuss next, please let me know in the comments. And I love you all so much. I'm going to see you in my next podcast. That's fine with me. Love you all. Bye-bye.